All right, so now let's move on into monopolies. Now, again, always start with your three characteristics. What are the three characteristics of a monopoly? Right, remember it's a monopoly. Mono means one, so there's one seller. What kind of a good is it? It's a unique good, right? It have to be unique.
Because if it wasn't, then there'd be more than one person making it.
Yeah, exactly, right. I mean, if it wasn't unique, someone else was making the same thing, then you'd have competition, then there'd be more than one seller, and, well, it's not. How hard is it to get in and out? Yeah. Virtually impossible to get in or out of the market, right? Once you buy into it. Well, so there's a great question. How do monopolies occur? So, how do monopolies occur? You should write this one down, yes. There are three ways that a monopoly can exist. What's one of the ways that we know exist right now? Patents, right? So that's usually number 3. Sole owner of the rights to produce. What's another reason?
You were the sole owner of the material that it took to produce it.
Yes. Natural monopoly. Resource owner. So the example that's best used to describe this one is Alcoa. Alcoa used to be the only company in the United States that made aluminum. And the reason was that they were the only ones that owned the rights to the bauxite mines that exist in Colorado foothills. In fact, for a long time, those were the only source of bauxite in the entire world, right? From the 50s until about the 80s, maybe more like mid-70s. Alcoa was the only producer of aluminum in the entire world. And think about all the stuff we use for aluminum, right? I mean, prior to the 50s, all of our cars were made of steel. After the 50s, 60s, and 70s rolled around, oh, good Lord, yeah. I mean, everywhere you go, right? And so what was Alcoa doing back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s as a monopoly holder on aluminum? Oh, guys, they used to swim in money. They would take this big, huge Olympic-sized swimming pool, fill it with bills, $100 bills, and the executives would swim around in it. I mean, they were so loaded with money, it was redonkulous. I mean, they were just, yeah, they had money. It was great. If you were in on Alcoa back in the 70s, whew, you knew how to party.
My brother's first wife was, her father was
In the beginning? Oh, wow. So what happened to Alcoa then? Why are they almost defunct now? Yeah, they found bauxite in the foothills of China and in the foothills of Europe. So eventually someone found other resources to make aluminum from, and then all of a sudden Alcoa was like, oh, we used to have this monopoly and we charged a huge markup on their aluminum. I mean, they were making, it was cheap metal to make, and they were selling it at almost the price of steel, which is expensive as hell, folks. And so Alcoa, wow. But then all of a sudden they had competition, and then when they had to compete, what did they discover they had to do? Yeah, they had to lower their price, but then could they lower their costs? I mean, once you've learned to swim in a swimming pool made of cash, can you swim in a swimming pool made of water? It's a lot harder. Because if you're just swimming around in cash, you could breathe, but when you're underneath water, guess what happens? Anyways, yeah, that's unfortunately what happened to Alcoa. So what's the number one reason that we have monopolies in this country, folks? Yeah, government sells it to us, folks. Government sold. All of these water, all of the sewage, all of the electricity, all that stuff is sold by the U.S. government to different companies to be the provider of that particular material. Used to be, telephones were the same way, right? Back when you had the Bell Corporation, but then government decided that they wanted competition, and so they split them all up. And they split them all up into a whole bunch of little pieces. What have all those phone companies been doing over the last 20 years? Slowly buying each other back up and coming back closer to a monopoly. Gotta love the market structure. Anyways, these are the three ways that we tend to get monopolies. Now, there is a fourth way. Well, we can talk about it a little bit. You can also have a monopoly that's driven through economies of scale. Basically, what it means is that it costs too much to have more than one of them. The example that I like to use for these are the major sporting networks. Think about the National Football League. Is there another same level National Football League of any type? For those of you who are old enough, there used to be a U.S. Football League. Do you guys remember the USFL? Started by what's-his-face in Texas?
Even the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be two entities almost, Right, and they merged together. And why did they merge together?
It costs too much to be...
Two separate leagues, right, exactly. So they merged together and formed one. But, and again, same with baseball, same with basketball, all those, hockey, you name it. Everybody that's a major sporting league, the reason why there's only one of them is because to start another football league would take at least 8 individual teams starting up. I mean, what's the average salary of a national football player? Any of you know? $500,000 is the minimum wage that an NFL player makes for playing a whole season, which is more than half the games. Yeah, it's about $1.2 million for an average football player. Baseball, average salary for a baseball player, $1.4 million. Minimum salary for a baseball player, $600,000. I mean, imagine 50 of those guys and stadiums and the rights to own all those stadiums and parking lots and merchandise. And exactly. So are you ever going to have more than one of these? Probably not. Now, my question to you is, what does the government do with all of these monopolies? I mean, if there's a monopoly that exists, what does the government do? I mean, theoretically, though, I mean, what is... Well, they do tax them, but what does the government do if there's no competition in a market? What is it? Do you guys know what an antitrust suit is? They force you to have competition. If you don't have competition, then they actually step in and start making laws about what prices you can set, folks. I mean, that's the whole point of the 1920s, right? If you think about Mobil Oil and Rockefellers, all those people, they existed because they developed monopolies back in the 20s and 30s and started raising prices steadily, more and more and more on people. And once people, once the stock market crashed and people didn't have money, did those Rockefellers lower their prices to help the poor people out? I mean, when you're rich, do you help the poor people out? Well, you do, but you do it in lip service only, right? Oh, yeah, of course, right. I mean, profit is what's king, folks. We don't care about people, we care about profit, right? People are just letters. They're FTEs, remember, okay, for this part of the class. All right, so anyways, there's 4 separate ways that it can exist, but realize that once you are in a monopoly, theoretically the government controls your pricing structure. You get to get profit usually, but only a certain amount, all right? Which is why most corporations don't like to be in a monopoly. It's why Walmart will never be a monopoly. It will never undersell all of its competitors out of the market. Because if they do, then the government's going to step in and start, looking at their books and figuring how much money they're really making and making them set prices at a certain state. They want so that they don't have to deal with the government any more than they already do. Right? Monopolies, generally companies don't like them. Except that, again, if you're buddies with the government, you can get the government to let you have more profit.
But they don't mind selling some product for under their cost.
Again, that's just to kill competition, though. Once the competition's gone, monopolies won't sell under ever. That's usually economies of scale, yeah. And that's what the NFL actually did to kill the one competition it had for 5 years, right? When the USFL came out, it existed for about 5 years, and what the NFL did was it cut all of its revenue that it was earning on its advertising and So the USFL had to deal with the profit margin that the NFL was setting, and it wasn't enough to make it worthwhile for those 5 guys that were running the USFL until they folded it. And the government didn't step in and...
I think some of those guys were involved and started arena football.
Oh, yeah. And then they sold it as a different product,
Yeah.
which was wise because then they didn't have to fight the NFL.
A whole different game.
In theory.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nicole, did you have a question? Okay. All right, so monopolies, regardless, they exist. It's part of life, right? Can they have, are they price takers? Do they have to set, do they have? No. Yeah. These guys are price makers or price setters. So our demand goes back to looking the way we expect demand to look, right? Downward sloping demand curve, none of this perfectly flat elastic crap, right? The other nice thing about a monopoly, do you need to have 2 graphs? Is there a market and individual? If there's only one seller, then the market and the individual, same damn thing. So at least in that sense, the monopoly is a little bit nicer. So here's our demand. Now it's this downward sloping curve. When you have the downward sloping curve, the other nice thing about perfect competition is demand and marginal revenue were the same. That is not the case in a monopoly, folks. In a monopoly, you create the marginal revenue by bisecting your demand curve. Cut that angle in half. Again, the math behind that will be in the homework, and you can see it in the book, too. I'm not going to go over it. Don't worry about it. Just know that this is what you do. And so if you have your cost curves, and cost curves, again, they're still roughly the same for the most part. Here's your average total cost. Here's your average variable cost. Suppose here's your marginal cost. Is this particular monopoly, in this instance, making a profit? Again, please be careful finding the profit point for this market. You're still going to hit where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. Same as we were doing up here, right? Here's marginal cost, here's marginal revenue. Where those intersect, that's your magic point. Here's marginal cost, here's that marginal revenue. So this is your magic point. This sets your quantity. Please note that this does not set your price. Price is driven by demand, not by marginal revenue. So at this quantity, go all the way up to your demand curve. This is your profit maximizing price and quantity. It is a little weird. It is a mess, yes. But the math is what drives this, folks. Again, I would pull out tables and we would go over it, but we don't have time, so I'm going to show you the graph and we'll deal with it as best as we can. But the other nice thing about a monopoly, can you have profit forever? Yeah, as long as you stay a monopoly, right? As soon as you start getting competition, then that starts to get questionable. But as long as you're a monopoly, we're all good. And remember that we still profit maximize where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Now, how efficient is a monopoly? Are monopolies efficient?
Only as long as they stay a monopoly.
Efficient? Are we anywhere near variable cost? No. In fact, monopolies tend to be the least efficient market there is out there, simply because they don't have to worry about it, right? Since they're guaranteed to have a certain level of profit, there's no point to minimum.
Say you were some guy that found some element that was more, that
Okay.
You were the only one.
Right.
I mean, basically, as long as you held that,
Right.
it would be efficient.
Yeah. Well, but again, the way I'm defining efficient, right, is not how much money you're making, but whether or not you are minimizing your costs. That's it.
So in other words, to be efficient, you want to be able to somehow reach that equilibrium.
Well, be careful, right? I mean, in theory, to be efficient, you would find that spot where you are producing at the lowest average total cost possible. That's what you're doing when you're being efficient, is you're not wasting any money doing anything but making your product, right? You don't waste your money on advertising. You don't waste your money on buying politicians. You don't waste your money on, having TV advertisements tell people that your electricity is better than someone else's electricity. I mean, one of the things that pisses me off about the monopolies that exist in Wisconsin is that I constantly see television advertisements for them. Right? I mean, MG&E, right? I mean, or Alliant Energy. You've seen them advertise on television, right?
Yeah.
Why are they bothering? You can't buy your energy from anybody else. So it's not like you have to like them. So what do they... True, you want to be like... But what does advertising do? I mean, think about it. What is
Into your efficiency.
it cuts into your efficiency, right? I mean, they're taking away money that they could spend producing electricity, and they're spending it on advertising. Who has to pay for their advertising?
Exactly. It doesn't lower your cost.
Right? I mean, that's usually what most monopolies do, and this is I can't prove it, so I can't take it to court or anything, but when it comes time for these businesses to ask the government to give them a rate increase, guess what starts to happen? You see advertising showing up on television. So that when government officials go to ask their constituents, well, should we allow, MG&E or Alliant Energy to raise their rates by, like 2%?
Oh, yeah, because they're spending more money.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're nice. They're the good company, right? They're making clean electricity out of a coal-burning power plant. Anyways, sorry. Whenever we talk about monopolies, I go mildly insane. So, but again, the graph here, the marginal revenue, that's what drives everything. Now, the cool part about monopolies and perfect competitions is that it's really the two extremes of our markets, right? I mean, if you think about it, right? If this is the world, on one end, you've got the monopoly where there's just one seller. On the other end of the world is the exact opposite. That's the perfect competition, all right? So what's in the middle? The other two. That's Chapter 9. That's the real stuff, right? We'll talk about those here in a little bit. Now, let's skip. We are going to skip the price discrimination portion of monopolies. I hope you don't mind. So when you come to that portion of the text, don't sweat it. I won't. That I can't promise. All right, so pretty sure that's all there is then for Chapter 8. Characteristics, how we get them is so the last thing on Chapter 8 before we move past it. If we were to compare the two of these, how does price compare between a perfect competition and a monopoly? Which one has a higher price? Right. Why? Because they can't. Because there's no competition, right? So usually, perfect competitions have the lowest price. So What about the quantity that they produce? This, how much do they produce?
As much as they can.
Yeah. Folks, these guys, again, remember, they waste no money on anything other than production, period. They're going to get every can out of every one of their resources. Monopolies, on the other hand, they have no reason to produce more. In fact, it's a disincentive for them to produce more, because if they produce more, what's going to happen to the price? It's going to go down. And what's probably going to happen to their profit? If you have no competition and no one's forcing you to produce more and lower your price,
If they figure out they are making too much, they'll
generally true. And so then, very true. That tends to be what they try and do. So efficiency-wise, these guys are the most efficient. Monopolies, generally, they're considered the least efficient. Again, take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. It's not like the monopolies are going to throw away money by not being efficient. It's just that there's no reason for them to minimize their cost, because then they will be overproducing, and they don't want to do that. All right? All right, so let me make sure I don't assign one of the homeworks that deals with price discrimination in Chapter 8. Oh, I like that one. So the homework for Chapter 8 is 2, 6. 6 is filling out another table, folks. Yep. Homework, Chapter 8. Numbers 2, 6. Eight and 12. None of those are talking about price discrimination. That's page 171 and 172. All right, so I'm going to leave this up here a little bit, because now I'm going to fill in the middle portions of the world, if you will. All right, so there's 2 new spots that are going to get filled in here. The first one that we're going to talk about is what's called a monopolistic competition. So it looks like I'm taking these two and kind of merging them together, and that's essentially what we're doing. All right? So black is getting worse on me here. Chapter 9. Monopolistic competition. So, again, when we get to a new market structure, 3 characteristics. So a monopolistic competition, it's to the right of a perfect competition, which means it's got less competition going on than a perfect competition. Perfect competition is always the extreme. So how many sellers are there in a monopolistic competition? Lots, but not lots and lots, okay? So the key here is less than a perfect competition. So there's a bunch of people selling this product, but it's not so many that it's uncountable. All right? Now, the product that we're making in a monopolistic competition is essentially the same, but the sellers don't want you to believe it. So in other words, if you think about fast food, folks, this is the most classic example of a monopolistic competition. Are there lots and lots of people making fast food? Hell yeah. Is it any different? Yeah, if you need to justify it so that you can feel safe about buying it, then yes. Exactly, the one that you go to, that's the one that's good for you. Laundry detergent. Oh yeah. I agree, exactly. But some of them are going to have, they're going to protect your colors, and some of them are going to protect your whites, and some of them are going to protect your laundry machine, and some of them are going to make your clothes feel like, like you're. Exactly, they'll last for 100. But are they? Of course. See, so they're really different, aren't they? You think there's a difference between a hamburger and a hot dog? There isn't. Exactly. See, so the whole point is this has worked on you. If you think there's a difference between a hamburger and a hot dog, you have been advertised to and have been convinced they're different. There is no difference. A hamburger and a hot dog are the same thing. They're a meat product. If you think that the hamburger is a better meat product than a hot dog meat product, folks, it's not. No, they're the same. When you buy the beef from Brazil, whether you put it into a hot dog or you put it in a hamburger, it came from the same machine. The sad thing is I've been to their factory.
Yeah, but you shouldn't buy from Brazil.
Oh, and they don't. Again, right, ask McDonald's. They don't buy any of their beef from Brazil.
Okay, hamburger and hot dog in a fast food restaurant is the same thing.
Well, exactly, fast food. All right, so how easy is it to start a fast food chain? Is it as easy as switching from wheat to corn, though? Not quite, right? So it's relatively easy. Yeah, I mean, practically, it sets itself up, right? If you want to start a Subway, folks, that's right now easy as pie to do it, right? All you need is enough money. That's sort of the bigger problem, is that it costs a certain amount of money, and you have to have a place where the market analysis is advantageous to you. Purchasing a franchise, folks, if there's already 3 Subways in a city that of a certain size, they won't let you. They actually won't sell you a franchise in that city. They won't let it happen, period. Because then they will have an overproduction in that particular area, and one of them is going to go out of business. They know it, so they won't let you buy it. Even if you offer them $1 million, they won't sell it to you. Right? Normally, a Subway franchise costs you about $120,000, $125,000 to start it up, and then it's usually $60,000 a year to the franchising company. Which, I mean, if you think about it, Subways make about anywhere between $80,000 to $100,000 a year in revenue. Costs around $60,000. Yeah, you make $20,000 to $40,000 a year off of your Subway. If you work there, you make more, right? Because then you cut your cost of employees and stuff. But that's kind of the way they work, all right? So these are the 3 generic characteristics of monopolistic competition. So what is our demand going to look like? Now remember, in a perfect competition, what did demand look like?
It's going to be flatter, but not horizontal.
All right, exactly. Here's our perfect competition. Here is our demand for a monopoly, where our product is unique. It's really steep. Remember Chapter 5 and elasticity? As you start getting more competition, what happens to your elasticity? It becomes more and more elastic, right? Your demand curve flattens. So demand for a monopolistic competition, it's downward sloping, but it's not as steep. So it's a downward sloping demand curve, but it's relatively flat. Now, do they get to set their own price, though? technically, folks, you do get to set your own price, right? Anytime you have a downward sloping demand curve, you get to choose what your price is going to be. It's just that how much of a choice you have is much more limited, right? I mean, if you're going to start, suppose you're going to start up your own new one, right? So instead of buying a franchise, you're going to create, Marshall's Burger Joint, right? So we're all going to start it, right? You guys are all going to lend me some venture capital, and I'm going to find a place and create the supply structure, and we're going to start our own fast food joint, all right? Can I sell my burgers for $10 a piece? Yeah, I might if I build it in the right spot, right? If I can find, say, a spot right in the Capitol itself, where Governor Walker, who loves state employee teachers, decides to sell me like an office in the Capitol where I can start up my own burger company, right? It's going to happen, right? I mean, Scott Walker loves me. He loves his employees. Ask him, he'll tell you. So suppose we get it there, right? I mean, I could potentially Am I going to be able to get away with it for long? Probably not. My knees are a little knobby. Anyways, right? So we get to set the price. What?
When you hire a food bar.
Of course. Hello. Okay. I'll have my wife do the delivery. All right. So, can we make profit in this industry? Marginally, right? So long run profit, can it exist? Forever? No. And long run means essentially forever. Nope, not forever. But short run profit lasts longer. Why does short-run profit last longer? Well, there's still lots of sellers out there. So if there aren't enough people competing in there, what's going on, right? If there's not enough competition, then we're making a profit. Right? So there's lots of competition, but if there's just not enough competition to meet all of the demand, so our prices are a little bit higher than maybe they should be, is that going to last forever? Why not? If there's not enough competition, what's going to happen? Eventually, if everybody's making a profit running a Subway, people are going to copy it, right? They're going to say, well, if two Subways are existing in here and they're both making $100,000 a year, and the average expectancy for a Subway is like 50 or 60, that means that demand is still high. What's Subway going to do? Sell another franchise. You're going to get more competition. It's just going to...
Because if they don't,
Yeah, right. Uh-huh. Somebody will. Someone is eventually going to enter the market because it's relatively easy. All right? So the reason that these world doesn't make profit is because of this word, right? There's competition. And as long as it's relatively easy to get in and out, anytime you see profit, it's going to disappear. Because people are going to come in and say, well, I want a piece of that pie, and there you go. All right? How are they going to profit maximize? Yeah, good. That's the way to remember it, is that this is all energy driven, folks. MR equals MC, right? That always is the way it works. So, Now, I'm going to save number 7 for a little bit later, so bear with me, because I want to get the graphs. The graphs for this, again, I apologize to some degree because they're going to look a little nasty, but the cool part about it is it's really no different than a monopoly. The only difference between a monopolistic competition and a monopoly is that a monopoly has a really steep demand curve, and a monopolistic competition, it's flatter, right? So here's what demand looks like in a monopolistic competition. It's downward sloping, but it's pretty darn flat, all right? How are we going to get the marginal revenue? Remember, it's the same as a monopoly. What did we do in a monopoly? We bisected the angle. Guess what we do here? Bisect the angle. Same thing. Find the angle here and say cut it in half. So you're going to have to do it for Chapter 9 as well as Chapter 8, folks. So get used to bisecting an angle. It makes you sound like you really know what you're doing, too, geometrically. It does. If you say bisect, everybody's like, whoa, nerd, right? Exactly, yeah. Isn't it awesome? It's like, wow, I'm really smart. I know what bisect means. Anyway, so, and our cost structure. All right, so let's be nice to this particular monopolistic competition. Here's its average total cost. Here's its average variable costs. And here's its marginal costs. Is this monopolistic competition making a profit? How can you tell that it's making a profit without even doing anything yet? Because the demand line is above the average total cost. Well said, Kedrick. All right? Whenever that happens, you know that's where your price is going to wind up. Period. You do the same thing you did in the monopoly. Find where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Same thing. Here's your marginal cost. Here's your marginal revenue. Remember that sets your quantity. Where's the price? Up at the demand line, right? So right now, this is your profit per unit, right? This is the price you're selling it for. This is the cost it takes for you to make it. So my question to you is, when you are making profit, how does your profit disappear graphically? Because I told you there's no profit, right? So imagine, if you will, you start a new Subway here in Janesville, and you're making $100,000 a year from your Subway in Janesville, right?
Average total cost going up.
Average total cost. Why would your average total cost go up if there's more competition?
Advertising.
Bingo, right here, folks. If you have more competition, how do you fight your competition?
Advertising more than us.
That's absolutely right. I mean, if you think about that, one of the best examples of this is McDonald's, right? When McDonald's first came out, was there another fast food joint in the country? Well, they were sort of the only ones. I mean, the only thing that was competing against McDonald's was bringing your... Yeah, exactly. But you didn't... Right, exactly. There were these mom and pop places. There was nothing that was national, right? So it was only local competition whatsoever, right? And McDonald's, since it was national and had all of this supply chain built up, they were cheaper. Oh yeah, sure, and they were cheaper, right? You could go get a burger and fries and a Coke for 20 cents back when they first opened, right? And that's how they got started. And the mom and pop shops, what happened to them? Bye-bye, right? Unless they could sell burger, fries, and Coke for 20, 25 cents, So what did McDonald's do once they killed all their competition? All of a sudden it was 35 cents for your burger, fries, and a Coke, right? And now McDonald's is making tons of money. They do this for 4 or 5 years, what happens? Burger King! Burger King and McDonald's starts competing, right? So what happens to prices? They start to go up a little bit more, but there's still lots of profit going in there. What happens? Wendy's. They're still making profit. Arby's, Hardee's, Kentucky Fried Chicken. Exactly. Name them all, right? I mean, more and more competition. But, so the problem here is that there's two things that a monopolistic competition can do when they start to get more competition. So how do we handle competition? One is, as Kedrick said, advertise more, spend more money. But when you advertise more, what happens to your average total cost curves?
You expect to have more customers, they go up. It goes up.
It's got to go up, right? So the other way to go about it, one way to go about it is to say, okay, we refuse to lower our prices, right? My burgers are worth, $2 a burger. So if someone else comes in competing, selling it at $1.75, I let everybody know that I sell better burgers than them, right? I don't buy it from Brazil. I swear I don't. I don't use pink slime when I mix my burgers up. I swear I don't, right? And my hot dogs are made from pure grade A beef, right? It's still toenails and anus and nose, but it's still grade A beef. You don't want to know what goes into a hot dog, folks. Everything but the fart. And they'd put that in there if they could. Sorry. So the one way to do it is to say, okay, I refuse to raise my price, but what happens is that your average total costs start to rise. And they will keep rising until essentially what happens to your profit? Disappears. Now, remember, economic profit. They're still making their accounting profit, right? So the Subway is still making them $50,000 to $60,000 a year. It's just not making them that bonus $20,000 to $30,000 on top, right? Because the competition came in and said, no. If you're making $90,000, we should both be able to share that and make $50,000, right? And yeah, you'll have to advertise a little bit more. We'll have to spend a little bit more money, but, now we can share. And sharing is good, right? No. Remember, we don't like sharing. Now, what's the other way that you can go about it, right? If you get competition and they sell their burgers at $1.75 and you're selling yours for $2, lower your price, right? Basically, you either share the profits at the higher price or you allow your demand to shrink. Because some of your demand is going to go to your competitor, right? So what happens to your demand curve? Flattens out a little bit, and it shrinks down a little because there's less demand for your product because you've now got a competitor who's stealing some of your market share, right? And that's what happens to a demand line when you get competition. It starts to get lower and lower, right? Because less people are going to come to your store. So your demand is naturally lower. And so what happens is that your demand line flattens out a little bit, and you get this new demand that's parallel to your average total cost, except instead of being $2 a burger, it's going to be $1.75 a burger. Take your pick. And that's pretty much what most monopolistic competitions have to do, is they have to decide, am I going to go ahead and advertise so that I can keep my prices high, or am I going to accept the competition, let my prices drift down, and make less money? Depends on which avenue your business wants to go, right? I mean, what did McDonald's and Wendy's and Burger King all do? They created dollar menus and they came up with new jingles, right? 2 all-beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun, right? I mean, you can't forget that shit, right? It's stuck there permanently. That was created in the 70s, folks. It's still there. Damn it. That's right. Or you start speaking Italian, so your coffee is more important. So you can charge $4 for a coffee, and people will still keep coming to your store and buying your coffee, right? I mean, why else would you open a Starbucks, right? I mean, how much does it cost to make a cup of coffee at home? About 4 or 5 cents. How much does it cost to buy it at a coffee shop? I mean, depending on how crazy you go with your coffee, right? If you want a double whipped half-calf mocha upside down cappuccino with a smile on the top, right? I mean, it's $5.50. Thank you very much. I use the coffee from the coffee pot across the hall. I bring my own Folgers, $8.99 for 85 pounds worth of it. I drink the cheapest coffee possible. But my wife doesn't do that, and so I have to adjust. All right, so anyways. So the question then is, are we efficient? Are we as efficient as a perfect competition? No. Why? Where do we waste our money? Remember, advertising is king. Right? There's no way you can sell in a monopolistic competition without at least telling somebody that you're there, and that costs money. Period. Even if it's favors, right? If you want to do your business word of mouth, right? Those people about your business, you have to basically let them eat for free, right? That's cost. You don't want to think it is, but it really is, right? So, are we efficient? Not as much as a perfect competition. Not as much as a perfect competition, but at least we're better than a monopoly, right? I mean, we have competition, therefore we have to figure out how to minimize our costs, right? This is exactly why people in a monopolistic competition do not want an increase in minimum wage. I mean, think about how well they have maximized their profit coming out of these Subways and Burger Kings and McDonald's and whatnots, right? They've done it based on it being, $7.25 an hour, or whatever minimum wage is right now. If all of a sudden it hops up to $10, what are those places going to have to do? They're actually going to have to do some damn economics. One of the two, though. They'll deal with it one of two ways, right? Same type of business, right? Not as much a perfect competition, but let's face it, folks. Better than a monopoly. And remember, the number one reason why monopolistic competitions are not efficient is because they waste money advertising, right? If they would just quit advertising, basically they're efficient except for this part of it. Right? You must know that Pepsi is better than the bottle that says cola on it. Because it is. It's better. Why? Because they told you so. And we believe them. Exactly. Therefore, it's better. All right. So a monopolistic competition. How's their price? Is it as low as a perfect competition? Not quite. Nope. Low, but more than a perfect competition. Yeah, same difference. How much are they producing? Are they producing as much as a perfect competition? Not quite. Lots, but not as much as a perfect competition, right? And again, how efficient are they? Decent. But they ain't no perfect competition, right? Get some vernacular in there. So, the nice thing about these monopolistic competitions is that we know how they work, because these are the things that we've been dealing with forever, all right? Those things that advertise at us the most generally wind up being in a monopolistic competition. All right, now, the last market structure we have to take a peek at is then the in-between of these that's closer to a monopoly than it is to a perfect competition.
That'd be like, let's say, for instance, a company that produces like one product, but many variations of that one product. Let's say Kellogg's, for instance. Kellogg makes breakfast cereal, but they make,
there any difference between all those different cereals? They're all the same cereal, right? They're just cereal. But is Kellogg's the only maker?
No, General Mills.
General Mills is another one. What's the other one? There's one more, right? What's the big three? Post, right. Post, General Mills, and Kellogg's. Those are the three big ones that make breakfast cereal. Those three big ones, folks, are in an oligopoly, right? It's a monopoly, but it's oli instead of mono, right? And oli means few. Not quite many, because many almost implies too much, right? The key, though, is it's more than one, less than lots. Again, lots. Is that 10? Is that 50? Is it 15? Is it 25? I don't know. Okay? A lot of this is, just sort of setting the groundwork for what's going on around there. So bear with me to some degree. All right, so oligopolies. The reason you guys will like oligopolies the most is because we will do zero graphing with oligopolies. So they'll be your favorite. All right, so how many sellers are there? More than one, less than lots. So you could say a few, but a few might be a few too many. So you would have to say a few less than a few too many, but a few more than one. Because few maybe means there has to be at least three, but two's enough, folks. Two's enough. As long as there's two, you're an oligopoly. All right? Do we differentiate our products? May or may not differentiate. So does Kellogg's tell you that their cereal is better than General Mills?
To some extent.
Yeah, of course they do, right? Of course, how do they do it? They advertise, but sometimes they advertise with cartoons, right? Because who eats the most cereal in this country, folks? Kids. And how do you sell to kids? Cartoons, right? You get some bizarre Japanese anime thing kind of up there going, and the kids are like, "Oh, I want that." It's like, really? What did they say? It's like, I don't know, but it's got to be good. Because they swung a sword around, and there was a blue light that flashed out of them, and he was wearing a yellow flowered outfit on. Of course not. It had nothing to do with the cereal. It's just great marketing. Right, exactly. But somehow that makes it better. Don't ask me how. I'm not 6 anymore, so I don't know. But the fact remains is that some markets in an oligopoly you will see product differentiation, some you won't. And I'll try to explain when and where they do and don't. So, real easy to get in and out. Relatively easy to get in and out. Impossible to get in and out. So what's this one going to be? Yeah, it's kind of hard, right? Tough to enter, exit the market. In other words, Apple, Microsoft. Amen, brother, right? I mean, how easy would it be to create the next Microsoft/Apple, or to create the next, Ford or Chrysler, or create the next Kellogg's or Post or General Mills? Is it doable? Sure. I mean, you guys could start a car company.
There's other ones that are trying all the time.
Sure, There's lots of people that are
Kashi or whatever.
Right, yeah. Right, there's organic breakfast food that somehow is good for you. Why would you eat breakfast if it's good for you? I mean, come on. Yeah. So that's what they need to start doing, is advertising eggs with cartoons, right? The chickens that... All right, so these are our heuristics. Are we going to get to set our price? Yes, you bet you are, right? I mean, come on, we have a downward sloping demand curve. And you're going to tell me that it's steeper than a monopolistic competition, but not as steep as a monopoly, right? I mean, that's the way that all of this, the cool part about this is that once you start going in a direction, it's a continual flow from one to the next, right? Always, right? These guys are the lowest price, and then the prices keep getting higher and higher and higher. These guys make the most, and the quantity keeps getting lower and lower and lower and lower, right? So it's very, there's lots of continuity in this, right? What was number 5 again? Long run profit? You think you're going to have long run profit in an oligopoly? I mean, do you have competition? You've got some competition, so, I mean, could it last forever? This one's a little on the tough side. It's a little bit of a maybe, maybe not stuff. Usually my answer is the same as Kedrick's, no. As soon as you get competition, long run, no. Because eventually, if the two of you, if there's only 2 people like Apple and Microsoft, are the only 2 people making, iPhones or whatever, eventually somebody's going to come along and say, okay, I can make an iPhone too, right? Or if enough people are making computers and you're IBM and you're the only computer maker out there, someone else is going to come in and figure out how to make more of them, right? That's the way it works. And that's the way the car industry has been, right? It used to be there were only like 4 or 5 different people making cars. Now there's maybe 8 or 9. Pretty soon there'll be 10 to 15. Then there'll be 20 to 30. And what keeps happening to profit margins? Down a little bit each time, right? Guess how they profit maximize even though we're not going to graph it? Yes. Please realize that on the test, I am going to ask you probably 2, if not 3 times, where does a firm profit when they are a monopoly? It's where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And in the next question, or 2 or 3 questions later, I'll say, where does a perfect competition maximize profit? And it will be the exact same answer. Please don't miss that one. Those are like free points, okay? So look for them, all right? Are these guys efficient? Not really. They're not as bad as a monopoly because they have to compete, so they have to be at least slightly efficient. Generally speaking, when oligopolies go to profit or to cost minimize, they tend to look more along the lines of, well, I don't care about my costs. All I need to do is maximize my profit. They tend to care more about demand than they do about supply. Just tends to be the way it works more often than not. Now, let me make sure I don't skip anything. Okay. Oh yes, there will be a review packet on Blackboard this afternoon. Let's see. So, how do oligopolies compete? And I'll put compete in quotes because it's a little odd. Generally, when oligopolies compete, they very rarely compete with price. Very rarely in an oligopoly do you say, oh, you should come and buy my product because it's cheaper than my competitor, right? Have you ever seen, or well, there's been times where it's happened, but have you ever seen Kellogg's tell you that well, you should buy Fruit Loops because they're cheaper than the Post version of Fruit Loops? Do they advertise price ever when it comes to cereal? Have you ever seen Kellogg's or any of those guys tell you my price is cheaper? No. How do they advertise? They talk about cartoons, right? Which one's better? Am I using anime, or am I using the Super Friends, or am I using, the Wonder Twins? Do I have Malto Meal? So these non-price methodologies are non-price competition, right? The other thing that goes on with what's the word? I'm forgetting the word. Somebody look it up for me. What's the non-price competition called? Do you got it open? Chapter 9? I'm forgetting something. Why can't I? Oh, mutual interdependence. Oh, that's what I was trying to remember. Mutual interdependence. All I could think was Mutual of Omaha. Don't ask me why that got stuck in my head. I got the mutual part right. Yeah, exactly. Damn advertisers. Mutual interdependence. What does mutual interdependence mean? What it means is that, in an oligopoly, everyone knows what everyone else is doing. Same thing, except it's really not, they don't know what each other knows, they just know what they're going to do next. And so what an oligopoly is constantly doing is saying, okay, well, I know if I make this advertisement for my product, I know my competitor is going to make an advertisement that is similar but slightly different. And so I will plan for that and have an advertisement that is slightly different but better than theirs. And the competitor will say, well, I know that once I make my advertisement, they will make one that's slightly better, so I'm going to make one that's slightly better. And it's exactly, right? They constantly have just what they keep one-upping everybody a little bit, right? They don't lower their price, right? I mean, you never hear them saying, well, you know, Pepsi is going to lower its price to $1 a 2-liter bottle instead of $1.50. No, that's not what they do, right? They don't use price, they use advertising instead. All right? And this mutual interdependence comes in various, sort of different ways. It's all, again, non-price driven. When you go to see advertising and they're not talking about price, generally, that's an oligopoly of some sort, okay? So, what do we use instead of price?
Well, how about the car manufacturers?
But do they advertise the price? Did you see? Did Chrysler say?
Price, but they'll say that there's
No, they say that they're a better value. They don't say that they're cheaper. They say they're a better value. That's not the same thing. Yes, that's not the same thing. I'm a better value. Whether you are or not is unimportant.
What are the buyers hearing?
But the buyer is not here. They're hearing that the price is less, but they're not advertising the price in reality. Because if they did, if Chrysler said you can buy a town car for $25,000, I guarantee you that the next advertisement on the list will be Ford coming out and saying, well, you can get the Ford, same level as a town car for $24,000. Well, whichever the Lincoln one is, again, but then there would be this price war. And would these oligopolies want a price war? No, because that would cut into both of their profit margins. Remember, these guys know. Well, yeah, if they actually deal with price, then it's monopolistic competition. These guys, they don't talk about price. They talk about value. What else do they talk about, right? They talk about value. They talk about safety, yeah. Or research and development, right? They'll say, we have spent millions of dollars making sure that this Chrysler is safer, that it's more gas efficient, that it's blah, blah, blah. Is it really? I mean,
Well, they use that Ford's trophy thing.
well, of course, yeah, uh-huh.
Car of the year.
Right, again, no price, just this stuff is better, right? And therefore, we can continue to charge the price we're charging, and you have to deal with it. You will buy our reputation because we said our reputation is good, and therefore our reputation is good, and you will buy it. It is very circular in its reasoning, but it works like a charm. Right? We buy into it, right? So, cell phones, right? I mean, why is an iPhone better than an Android?
Because they say it is.
Exactly. Are they any better? No. I mean, well, they run on a different operating system, which makes it better, right? Because we know all about the different operating systems that these things have on them, right? And we can tell which one is better because we all know what an operating system is, right? On an iPhone. It beats the shit out of me. I have no idea. Just makes it more expensive, right? I mean, why is it more expensive? Because they told us it should be. So, because my wife told me I had to have one. She said, I'm tired of you not answering the phone or any of my texts. And I was like, well, but I just have a flip phone. I don't know how to read the text on a flip phone. So I got an iPhone. Damn it. Anyways, whatever. So there are some places that have a little bit more to do with price, but these tend to be driven more along the lines of price leaders. The price leaders are the people like Walmart. Walmart is a very classic price leader example of an oligopoly. There are 4 or 5 major chains that are competing with Walmart. Who decides what the profit margin is going to be, though? Does Target set it? Does, JCPenney or Sears or any of the other large big box stores do it? No. Walmart does it. Walmart has figured out how to minimize their costs such that they can set the price on a highlighter such that no one else will make money on a highlighter but them, period. Does that mean that Target will quit selling highlighters? No. Does it mean Target will sell their highlighters at the price that Walmart set, though? Yes. If you see that Walmart sells one of these for 50 cents and it costs 75 cents at Target, are you going to go buy any of these at Target? No. Right.
Well, no, they got like that price setting thing where you bring in an ad.
Exactly, right? And they're basically telling you, hey, we're the price leaders, we're the price matchers. If you can find it cheaper at Target, fine, bring it in. But there's only going to be about 5 things that Target has at a lower price than us, ever. And that's the way it works. They are the price leader, right? Used to be that before Walmart, the biggest price leader was actually JCPenney. They were actually one of the bigger price leaders. What did JCPenney do to try and get away from Walmart's price leadership? Do you guys remember what happened to JCPenney? It's pretty close to out of business. What they did is they changed their name to JCP, and they created the we're going to only advertise on Tumblr, and we're only going to advertise on on social media, and that was the only place where they spent any of their money. Guess what happened to them? They're almost gone, folks. They didn't follow Walmart's guide of what should the price be and how much profit should be allowed. Right? Walmart is they're king right now, folks. They are very good at saying, look, here's the price. And note that Walmart is also smart. They don't set the price so low that these guys go under, right? Target's still around, right? I mean, JCPenney's still around. Sears is still around. They're not gone. If they
don't want to be on the map.
You better believe it, right? Walmart has no desire for any of its competition to disappear because the less competition they have, the more the government's going to start looking at them. And once the government can prove that they're a monopoly, ooh, then those Walmart owners, they got to be a little bit cautious, right? So what they've started to do, or what you may have known a couple of years, is that Walmart has not been dropping their prices as low as they were before. And the real reason was to make sure their competition didn't die.
They also started doing a little demographic location. They're not going into places where they're going to drive off every mom and pop.
Oh yeah, Again, make sure that there's.
That was hurt.
Yeah, well, that was hurting them because of perceived advertising, right? Negative advertising. Now, one of my favorite types of an oligopoly, by far, these are, if I taught this class as just a microeconomic class, we'd spend an entire week on these because they're so much fun. But we don't have that kind of time. And it would be so mathy, you guys would hate me. Cartel. Do you guys know what a cartel is? What's the number one example of a cartel right now, Kedrick? El Chapo, right? The drug cartels in Mexico. They're actually better than OPEC, right? It used to be the number one cartel in the world was OPEC, the oil producing economies in the central Middle East. But a better example is actually now the drug cartels down in Mexico. And the reason why is that what is a cartel? It's a group of oligopolies, oligopolists, that act like a monopoly. So basically what the group in the cartel says is we could, if we wanted to, all produce as much as we wanted to, and we could all sell our drugs at, roughly the same price, right? So a dime bag costs a dime, right? I mean, that's kind of the way it works. But if we all cut our production by 25%, right? So let's suppose that the three major drug cartels in Mexico get together and say, instead of producing as much as we can, we start cutting our production back. What happened to prices when supply starts to shrink? They start to go up. A dime bag starts to cost $20, right? Why would these guys want to do that? Duh, right? I mean, if you can sell something at $20 instead of at $10, what are you doing? More than doubling your profit, right? So the key here, though, is that they all have to cut their production. What caused all of the drug wars down in Mexico? If they're all cutting their production, guess what one of them does? Because at $20 a dime bag, right? I mean, they're like, well, if I just, sell all of my stuff instead of hoarding it, I could make a killing, right? So what do? They overship to the U.S. And all of a sudden prices start to go down a little bit, and all that other drug cartels look at the one that sold too much and say, hey, what are you doing? And they're like, nothing, I swear, nothing. And when they figure out that nothing was not really nothing, then what happens? You have drug wars, which is exactly what happened in the late 2008s, 2009s, right? That's what started the drug wars, is that somebody in the cartel cheated on their production schedule. They said, look, we are not going to produce 25% less. We're going to produce as much as we can and screw all the rest of you. And sometimes that leads to death. Not a good thing. All right, so that's most of Chapter 9. Not quite all of there, but essentially we are. We have one more chapter to do on Wednesday. Thank you, sir. And then I will get a review and some practice questions online in Blackboard sometime today or tomorrow. Hopefully today.
How many questions will be on
10 short answer, 50 multiple choice.
What do you mean by short answer?
Like graphing.
Can you make it like really easy? Everyone gets your name. That was almost
Yes. We made it through 7-3, right? You have the packet, right? Back of the packet is the homework? 7-3. Yeah, I don't think we made it, or 7-2, whichever one we hadn't gotten through. Then we got through 7-2, but we didn't quite make it through 7-3 then. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you got to do what you got to do. It's cool. Nope. Oh, yeah. See you, Nicole.